very much.
Thank you.
Yes.
You know, I'll tell you this story. I've told it a few times. The night that it was first aired, December 29th, 1967, I had all my college buddies come to my house for a party to celebrate. And after the show was over, several of them said, "Oh my gosh, that was wonderful. We had no idea you could write, and we had no idea you could write so well. It was just a wonderful episode. It really did." And they were going on at length, and I finally said, "Please stop. It's only one episode of one TV series. In 20 years, nobody's going to remember it." Yeah, it was 55 years ago. So. Challenge accepted, David.
You kind of sort of mentioned this in your last statement, but when you were writing, did you ever think that you would be responsible for something so eponymous in popular culture? And how does it feel knowing that that's your thing that has kind of become the world's?
You know, I never really thought about the consequences. There were stories that I wanted to read. Nobody else was writing them. So my job to write them. And what did happen, though, is that I discovered that you cannot sit at a keyboard all day long and type. You have to have something to write about. And the more that I got out into the world and had experiences, living in Manhattan, living in Ireland, living in Hong Kong, traveling a lot of different places, and finally adopting my son, every experience was a chance to learn something new about the world, and every time I came back and discovered that I had become a better writer, a better storyteller. So the focus was never on the money, which I have no on the money. The focus was never about the money. It was always, what's the next story? What's the next challenge? What's the next ambition? How do I become a better writer? Because I admired, this is a great question, by the way, thank you. I admired so many good writers, Samuel Delany, Harlan Ellison, Robert A. Heinlein, of course, Ursula K. Le Guin, Joanna Russ, and you should take some time to look up these people. I know you're more invested in modern writers, but sometimes it helps to see the giants whose shoulders we're all standing on. And I admired so many great writers. I wanted to, how do they do what they're doing? How does Ted Sturgeon make the language sing the way he does? And so it was always about, what can I learn? How do I become a better storyteller? How do I tell better stories? How do I tell them better? And I like to, think that has been the primary direction of my career for a long time, is what's the next big challenge for me as a writer. And one of the things, I'll mention this, there's a group you may have heard of called the Beatles. They had it's older people, Mike, Paul McCartney's first group. They had a thing where they would never write the same song twice. And I realized that early in my writing career that was what I wanted to do. Never write the same story twice, always see what is the next challenge beyond, what is the next thing I can do that I've never done before. So that's been the focus. I like to think that's the focus of my career. Thank you.
Two-part question. So, where did the idea for the Tribbles even come from? And second, when you presented it to the networks, how many people thought that was the craziest idea?
Well, the idea for the Tribbles, I've always been interested in ecology, even before the word ecology was invented. It's just the way things work together. And I had read quite a few articles about rabbits in Australia. There was some Englishman who decided that that Australia needed bunnies, and he brought in something like 6 rabbits. And there were no predators. And even today they still have a problem with rabbits in Australia, there's a rabbit-proof fence across half the continent to keep the rabbits from spreading southward. And I thought, well, we've seen a lot of aliens on Star Trek that are ugly, and you know they're a menace just looking at them. What would happen if there was an alien that looked so cute we didn't recognize it was dangerous until it was too late? And I was playing with this idea, and my girlfriend Holly Sherman had a keychain with a little fuzzball on it. And I said, oh, that'll do. And then it was Casino Coon, and he said it's too expensive. But I wasn't convinced, and so I wrote an outline, several outlines, but I wrote a fuzzy thing happened to me, and I wrote the outline, submitted it, and Dorothy Fontana, who became a lifelong friend for a lot of reasons, she's just absolutely a wonderful person, pulled it out of the slush pile, said, this has whimsy, let's hire a real writer. And Gino Kuhn said, no, I met this young man, let's see what he can do with it. And so it was a step deal, and I did it step by step, and somewhere along the line we realized we couldn't call them fuzzy, so I made up the word tribble, and which has since become somewhat iconic. I was just listening to a broadcast today where women who knit call their pom-poms tribbles without even knowing where the word originated. So I thought, oh my gosh, we created a new word in the English language. But anyway, that's where it came from, that I was thinking of rabbits in Australia.
Mr. Gerrold, before we get to the next question, there's something or someone I want to show you. I want to make sure that taking you over to the camera area, you can see the second place winner of our costume contest. If we come over here, is that right here?
If we can get her on stage.
Oh, let's put her on stage. Okay, hold on a second, Mr. Gerrold. While we're waiting, I'll tell you that I did a sabbatical in Australia, and every damn time I turned around, there were rabbits everywhere. So you're exactly right. So just hold on one second.
Oh, there he is, going up on stage. Oh, how wonderful. Looking through warm and cold weather.
And you drop these.
My chicken soup and coffee. My chicken soup and coffee. Or chicken sandwich and coffee. My chicken sandwich and coffee.
They were in the storage. They were in the storage department. Storage department. Okay, another question from Alan and Chris.
When you first found out about the, how did you find out about the homage the homage to the Tribble episode in DS9?
It's hard to understand you. There's a lot of echo off that microphone. I don't know if you can do anything about it.
So,
Is this one better? Is this microphone better, Mr. Gerrold?
Can you hear that second microphone?
Can you hear the second
I
microphone?
can hear you, but there's other. All right, try again.
Can you hear this microphone better?
Yeah. Yeah, try that.
So I just wanted to ask, when you found out about how did you find out about the homage in Deep Space Nine to the original episode that you wrote, and how did you feel about that, and what were your thoughts?
Well, the Deep Space Nine episode was brilliantly written. I thought that I said this over and over, but I think they did an incredibly good job. It's one of the best written scripts I have ever read, and the behind-the-scenes crew worked very hard on Deep Space Nine: Trials and Tribulations. Mike Okuda, Mike and Denise Okuda, who just won a Lifetime Achievement Award as art directors, duplicated the look and feel of the original Star Trek corridors. They got the measurements, they realized the size of the plywood boards that had to be painted gray. They matched the trim, they matched all the little pieces, they matched that orange webbing at one place. that was tricky. They had almost given up on that, and then found it was being used to block off a construction site on the studio lot. The only thing they couldn't match was that overhead holographic things, because the company was no longer the company that made those things was out of business, so they printed duplicates. Those were printed. The director of photography found matched the original film stock, used the same original lenses and the same kind of lighting. And the costumes, they had plenty of costumes from the original series, so they matched the costumes, but they had to make new ones, I believe, for the primary actors. But they duplicated everything, film stuff. Oh, and the makeup as well. We had different makeup in the 60s. So when you look at the Deep Space Nine episode and they suddenly go back in time, you can see everything, the whole look and feel of everything you're seeing changes to match the way the original episode was done. So, which was a large part of the success of that episode, because those new shots had to be matched digitally with CGI, that had to be matched to the original shots of the Trouble with Tribbles. And it was a remarkable job. Originally, those episodes, the Deep Space Nine episodes, were budgeted at $2 million per hour of television time. Trials and Tribulations came in at $4 million. That was money well spent. I believe it's one of the very best episodes of Deep Space Nine. And I was very proud that they did it, and very proud I was invited to be an extra on that episode. You can see me in a couple shots. I'm the great extra.
Very good. Next question.
Hey, Mr. Gerrold. Thanks for coming today. My name is Chris McCoy, and our illustrious leader, still Boloy, Captain Boloy, mentioned me earlier because I am a huge fan of the man who folded himself. It's one of the, yeah. So this is a non-Trek question, but can you talk, the thing about the man who folded himself, it is a time travel story, but it's one of the first stories that I ever read that incorporated the multiverse interpretation into the story. So that, there's multiple versions of the character, the lead character. He meets himself as various versions of himself, and it just gets weirder and weirder. And you wrote that a long time ago, and now that's a concept that you see all over the place. It's in Rick and Morty, for example, and there's also a film out this weekend called Everything Everywhere All at Once that is very similar. Can you talk about the origin of that story and the influence that it's had?
I had been living in Manhattan, and I had my agent also represented another writer named Don Westlake, and that Don needs somebody to house sit his house out in Culver Lake, New Jersey. And so I and my buddy went out and we lived in Don Westlake's very, very big, very nice house. And I had written half of The Man Who Folded Himself. And I gave it to my agent and forgot about it. And I wrote, living out in Culver Lake, which is a very, very nice area. I was writing every day. And but I was working on a book called The Matter for Men, and I wrote 14 chapters. And then one day the phone rings, and my agent tells me I just sold The Man Who Folded Himself to Random House. And the editor there was Lee Wright, who was one of the great editors from the 30s and 40s and 50s. She's just one of the classic editors of all time. And so I said, oh crap, I have to finish the book. So I put aside The Matter for Men and went back to The Man Who Folded Himself. It's a very difficult book to write, because I would write a page, and then I didn't know what happened next. And I'd have to sleep on it for a day and say, oh, I know what happens next. And I'd write 2 pages, and then I'd get stuck again. And then overnight, something would happen, my brain would work on it for a bit, and I'd wake up and I'd write 2 pages or 1 page or 3 pages. It was just a long, hard slog. And there were parts that I didn't want to write, and then like, what if Mom reads this? And I thought, the heck with it. I have to write this. I have to see how far this story will go. And once I realized that I had to see every possibility that I could imagine, the story started coming together. And I realized where I was going, and ultimately, the book was about self-responsibility. The hero says, here are all the possibilities and all the different times and all the different places I can go. Here's everything I can do. What am I going to do? He says, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I accept the responsibility that I get all these choices, which is, to me, is the important part of the book. But I didn't make a big thing out of it. It just boiled it down to the one last line I'm going to put on the time belt. I turned it in to Lee Wright, and bless her heart, and I mean that sincerely, not in a southern way, she said, I don't understand this. And she gave it to Barry Malzberg, who's one of the great science fiction writers, very underrated. Very interesting man. And he was working as her assistant. She said, Barry, I don't know what this is. I don't know how to understand it. And Barry read it and said, this is a tour divorce, publish it immediately. And the book came out in 1973 and was a Hugo and Nebula nominee, and made some waves in the field. The reviews were the reviewers were taken aback because nobody had ever done quite this thing in a science fiction novel, especially with the hero who was openly gay or bisexual, and very candid about so much, because it was really an opportunity to explore philosophical questions as well. But the book has been in print ever since, 52 years later. In fact, while we're talking, I have a box of copies behind me on the floor that I just got because there's a couple conventions coming up, and I'd like to sell my books. I'm in the business of selling books with my name on them. And you can go on Amazon and buy copies if you want. Or you can find me on Patreon or Facebook. But I'm very proud of the book. I consider The Man Who Folded Himself and The Martian Child my 2 best books of all time. And they're certainly 2 of my favorites. I'm not sure that they're my most ambitious. I've tried some other things, but I think they're the 2 books that have the greatest impact on readers. So I'm very proud of them. Thank you for asking about it.
Very good, very good. I'm Chief Engineer Barry Ford. Captain Mulroy is Chief Engineer. Pleasure to meet you. Speaking on the topic of writing, how did you get your screenplay, or how did you get your idea sold? What's the process? When you go from Tribbles to Fuzzies to being one of the most favorite episodes, what's that process?
But it's funny, this is a variation of the where do you get your ideas question, and most writers say, wait a minute, you mean you don't get ideas? I think a writer is a perpetual notion machine, that we're always asking what if, or if this goes on, or why are things this way and why can't they be that way? And I think there's a point at which you realize if I had done this, that would have happened. And if I had, for instance, I was thinking just the other day, in 1971, I was sharing an apartment with a friend, and he decided to move out. And the landlord didn't want to rent it to me. So I had to find a place out in the valley. And I found a house to rent. And a few years later, when the lady who was selling the house, a real estate agent knocked on the door, who I knew, said, "You're buying a house." And we went around the block, and I bought the house around the block. And because my neighbor, my next door neighbor, was a wonderful friend, and she encouraged me to explore the possibility of adoption. That's why I ended up adopting this marvelous little boy named Sean, who has since grown into an incredibly, just a wonderful young man. And I think if any one of those things had not happened the way they happened, I would never have met Sean. I would never have met the woman, my neighbor, who goosed me into going out and applying for adoption. And I would not have had the life I lived. I wouldn't have written The Martian Child. I wouldn't have, and so on and so on. And then, so part of what happens is we are a result of all the things that happen to us and all the experiences we go through. But also part of it is that I think we're constantly listening to the way the world works and thinking, why does the world work this way? Why can't it work that way? Let me quote you. There's a great writer named A.D. Van Vogt, and he was very active in the 40s and 50s. And you may have heard of him. And he said, whenever any writer talks about writing, they're second guessing. Because you're either writing or you're second guessing. So I've done the best I can to answer your question, but I'm not sure it can be answered accurately. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey there, it's kind of similar to the last question, but I guess I'm curious to know how you got involved with such an iconic show. Like, what was the, I guess, interview process, or how you joined the team of the original series?
I'm not sure I heard you clearly. Could you say it again a little slower?
Yes, sorry, I talked fast. I was just curious to know what the process was like of joining the writing staff for this show. How you got involved.
Well, in those days, you didn't have a writer's room. You had a line producer, that was Gino Kuhn, and you had a story editor, that was Dorothy Fontana. And most of the scripts were written by freelance writers who would come in and pitch a story or submit a written outline. And the producer would either say, no, I don't like that, or he would say, let's see what we can do with that. And I lucked out that Gino Kuhn said, let's see what we can do with this story about the fuzzy. And so the first step, and I did write a book about this called The Making of the Tribbles, which goes into much greater detail. But the first step is to create an outline which specifies what the scenes will be in the script when you write it. So you have an hour-long episode, which is usually, at that time, 30 or 35 scenes broken into a teaser, 4 acts, and a tag. And so you would have the teaser would be one scene, the tag would be one scene, and the individual acts, the 4 acts, corresponded to the what you would see between the commercials. And you would have anywhere from 5 to 7 scenes within that act. And each scene would have to be short enough that when you wrote the script, it would be 2 pages, 3 pages, never longer than 3 pages. So when you wrote the script, once the outline was approved, sometimes you went through a couple drafts of the outline to make sure the story structure was correct. And then once the outline was approved, the script, you would take each act and you would say, I have to bring this in at 14 pages. And so you would write your scenes and then trim them or expand them. And the heart of each scene would be the dialogue. So the trick would be, how do you create the kind of dialogue that keeps the story moving, that explains who the characters are, and at the same time doesn't go so long. So it's a trick to see, what can I say in 4 lines of dialogue? How can I do this very complicated discussion in 8 lines of dialogue? How can I do it in a page and a half? Because I have to fit 4 to 7 to 10 different scenes in these 14 pages. And so that would be first draft. And then you would look, the producer, the story editor would look at it and say, this line doesn't work, this scene doesn't work, this works, but, etc., etc. So on the first draft, I ended up cutting out the scene with Kirk asking Scotty who starts the fight, and Gino Coon said, put that back in, that's the best scene in the entire script. And Bob Justin said it was the best scene in the entire series for demonstrating the relationship of Kirk and Scotty, and which was high praise indeed from Bob Justin. And so that was the process of the outline, and then the script went through 2 or 3 revisions as we trimmed it, and you know, we can be a little funnier here, we don't need this, we need a scene that accomplishes this. So Gino Coon wrote 2 scenes, but most of the rest of the script is mine. Then you slap it over to the soundstage. Oh, no, first you give it to Matt Jeffries, who decides, I can build this, I can't build that, so you have to make some adjustments there. And then you take it over to the soundstage, you give it to the actors, and the actors read it, and they go, ooh, this looks like fun. And they go, oh, God. We lucked out. I was on the soundstage listening to how the actors spoke, trying to write the dialogue, that the way their characters were. And on the 3rd or 4th day, Leonard Nimoy comes up to me and says, I keep seeing you around here. Who are you? It's like, oh, and I had this thing. I was not going to interfere with any actor because I simply did not want to interfere with their process of getting ready for the next shot. And Leonard said, who are you? And I said, I'm David Gerrold, I'm writing the script. I must have looked like I was 14 years old, right? And then he said, which one? And I said, Gerrold. And Leonard said, yes, that looks like it would be very funny. I don't think he knew how to break character. Leonard was wonderful. Later on, we became very good friends. I admired Leonard. I miss him. He was just a great guy. And I'm not taking anything away from Bill. Bill was a workaholic who was there early in the morning till late in the evening. He had to learn 60 pages of script every week. I'm convinced that's one of the reasons for the way he delivered his dialogue, because he was always trying to remember his lines. You try memorizing, you try learning 60 pages of script a week. But Bill is a great guy. I got to tell you, I know Bill's a little shy. Most people don't know this. I think he's a little shy. He's hard to be. He doesn't know how to deal with people on a one-on-one basis. But he interviewed me for a thing he did, Kayak on the Bridge, and he's absolutely charming in person. I admired Leonard and Bill and Dee Kelly so much, and I fell in love with Miss Nichols. One absolute beautiful, charming, gracious, absolutely wonderful woman. I have been in love with her for 53 years. I met Walter on the set one of the first days. So once I had a sense of who Walter was, I could write dialogue for Ensign Chekhov. And Dee Kelly suggested the line, now he tells me. And at first I thought, I don't have a place for it. And then I thought, oh yes I do. So I was very pleased to have a very nice working relationship with all of them. And I listened to how they spoke, and I think that was what made the script work, is that I was writing dialogue that matched their speech patterns. Yeah.
I have a quick question. I'm going to take the host privilege here for a second. This is going to seem like the ultimate fan question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. I was wondering if you happen to have a favorite episode from the original series, and of course I'm going to exclude 2 of them. Obviously, Trouble with Tribbles, put to the side, because that's one of the all-time greats. And let's hear it.
I think the best episode of the original series is still City on the Edge. But my personal favorite, I have 2. Journey to Babel by Dorothy Fontana, because it's so much about Spock and his parents and his background. And it's really just a fun episode. But one of the episodes I really like, and it's not, and Dorothy never thought it was a great episode, but I always admired it, The Taste of Armageddon. Because Kirk has this great speech, yes, I'm descended from Killer Apes, but today I'm not going to kill. And that has been my mantra more than once in life. It's like, yeah, I'm just going to kill her. You'd be glad that today I'm not going to kill.
Okay.
So, yeah, thank you.
Other questions?
I'm going to walk towards the camera just so you can do one-on-one. Hey, so I have the tribble and everything.
Hold that up again. Hold that up again.
Yeah, it says,
yeah, I remember that.
It says, do not feed and has some vents and says, keep out of reach of Klingons and do not. Do not I actually got this at my first Shelby County Star Trek day, so it has a little bit of sentimental value. But yeah, I wanted to bring it. And as soon as I heard you were coming, it's like, oh, that's perfect. God, bring it. But yeah.
Let me mention, my buddy Miles has a company called TribblesToys.com. And he sells all kinds of tribbles that purr and shriek when they're around Klingons. So when I'm at conventions, I always take a few of his tribbles with to show people. I usually have a few tribbles on the table to sell as well. But so if you're interested in tribbles, check out TribblesToys.com.
All right.
Tell them I.
Okay, I will. I had two questions. I'm not sure which one to ask first. The first one, I just love the character of, I'm butchering the name, Serrano Jones. Cyrano Jones. I love that character so much. He was like a predecessor to Quark, just that salesman that is always. I'm surprised he didn't appear in more episodes.
David Gerrold was played by Stanley Adams, who was a great character actor. He actually wrote an episode for the third season. He was a great character actor, and he showed up as the bartender in some Western I was watching recently, black and white. But he also was the talking parrot in Lost in Space. But now I'm going to tell you, my original thought when writing Cyrano Jones was, and to this day I regret that I did not tell Gino Kuhn. I was so shy and so afraid to overstep my bounds, but my original thought was, could we get Boris Karloff to play Cyrano Jones? Yeah. Can I interest you in a harmless little tribble? I think it would have made a big difference in the show. It might have made it even better. I don't know. Maybe someday somebody will do something with CGI or something. So.
All right.
But thank you. Yes.
Yeah. My second question, because I've always thought this. What was your thinking of the movie Gremlins, and how you think the Trouble with Tribbles probably influenced the creation of that other portion of pop culture?
I never saw the movie, but I never saw it. So I understand it was very funny, very satirical. But at that time, that particular summer, I was doing a lot of traveling. And by the time I got home, it was no longer in the theater. So, and I've never caught up with it.
All right, but basically there were other buzzballs that multiplied. All right, well, thank you so much.
Mr. Gerrold, you mentioned the sounds of the tribbles that the tribbles made. It's the engineer again. Did you have anything to do with the sounds that they made, or did that come from one of the engineers, a sound engineer on the set?
Did it have anything to do with what?
With the sounds, the tribbles made?
I didn't. Well, I suggested that they purred and they shrieked, but I left it to the sound man, and I'm blanking out on his name. You'd have to check the credits. And what they did for the purr was they used a warped pigeon coo. Now I don't know how you warp a pigeon to make it coo. I'm afraid to ask. No, I said a pigeon coo, and they did something to the tape to make it verbal like it did. I don't know what they used for the triple shriek, but I was very impressed that the sounds that I had described on the script were very, very well done in the final episode. Yes.
I think we maybe have time for one or two more questions for Mr. Gerrold. Does anybody else have a question or a comment for Mr. Gerrold? Yeah, all right. Joe Ferguson, co-founder of Shelby County Star Trek Day.
Yeah, first of all, thanks for coming and being our first ever celebrity Skype, right? But mostly it's just a shameless plug. We're really proud. I don't know if Steve sold this enough, but we are literally the only city that has an officially sanctioned Star Trek Day. We've all supported it since the beginning, and we would love you to use your influence in the Star Trek universe to spread the word and get us on the map, man. This is a big achievement, I think. So.
Well, I can certainly, I hope you guys recorded all of it, and you'll post a link, because I can certainly share it on my Facebook page and tell people, hey, look, check this out. I don't talk to the other actors or writers very often. We're scattered across the entire continent now, but I'll certainly mention it to wherever I am. You might want to check. Will Wheaton is very active on Facebook, and he's a very interesting man and very accessible to the audience. And he's actually older right now than Patrick Stewart was when he was cast. So yeah, but I would recommend following Will Wheaton on Facebook. You certainly have a good time with it.
Very good. I think this will be the last question. No pressure.
I was wondering if you have had an opportunity to watch Star Trek Prodigy. Star Trek Prodigy, the new show, the new animated show.
I haven't seen Star Trek Prodigy. The only fan film that I can talk about is the James Cawley, who has the Star Trek set tour in Ticonderoga, upstate New York. Film. Yeah. In fact, I saw James just the other day. There was a screening at Paramount of the restored director's edition of Star Trek, the motion picture. And a lot of people who worked on it, a lot of longtime Star Trek people were there. Mike and Denise Akuda were there. James Cawley and Patrick Cawley were there. Larry Nemechek, who played Dr. McCoy in some of the fan films. And I lost count. David C. Fine, who oversaw the restoration, did a marvelous job. And but I recommend checking out. You can go on YouTube, and the Star Trek New Voyages fan films are still available. I wrote and directed one called Blood and Fire, which has quite a backstory to it, but it's a feature-length Star Trek episode, and you might enjoy it.
Well, Mr. Gerrold, I want to thank you once again for coming, and I want to wish you, I hope you're around for a long time, and I hope you continue to have success. I would like to boil that down into one 54-word phrase about longevity and success. I can't think of what the phrase would be. If anyone has any suggestions for a final send-off to Mr. Gerrold? Take care, Mr. Gerrold. Thank you very much.